Welcome back, everyone. You're about to see something wild, a quiet evening that turns into a full-on showdown. Picture this. A woman named Maya is chilling on her porch, sipping tea, when three fake HOA cops show up out of nowhere. They think she's an easy target, dragging her toward a creepy black van like they own the place. But here's the twist. They have no idea who they're messing with. Maya's not just some neighbor. She's a CIA badass with a secret team called her Ghosts, and they're about to flip this whole thing upside down. What happens when these thugs realize they've picked the wrong fight? Spoiler, it's fast, it's fierce, and it's awesome. We've got suspense, action, and a comeback you won't believe, all broken down in 6 epic parts. If you love stories where the underdog turns the tables, you're in the right place. Hit that like button if you're ready for the ride, and subscribe so you don't miss a single second of this crazy tale. Let's get into it. Part 1 starts now. The sun was dipping low in the sky, painting the quiet suburban neighborhood in shades of orange and pink. Rows of neat houses lined the street, each with trimmed lawns and flower boxes under the windows. It was the kind of place where nothing exciting ever happened, or so it seemed. On the porch of a small gray house with a red door, a black woman named Maya sat in a wooden rocking chair. She was in her late 30s, with short hair tied back in a simple ponytail and a pair of glasses resting on her nose. She wore a plain blue sweater and jeans blending in with the everyday feel of the neighborhood. In her hands was a paperback book, its pages worn from being read many times. A steaming mug of tea sat on a little table beside her, the faint smell of chamomile drifting into the cool evening air. Maya looked like any other person winding down after a long day. She turned a page in her book, her eyes moving slowly over the words, but her mind wasn't fully on the story. She was listening. Always listening. Years of training had made it second nature to her, picking up sounds that didn't belong, noticing things others missed. The neighborhood was quiet, but not too quiet. A dog barked a few houses down. A car engine hummed as someone pulled into a driveway nearby. The soft rustle of leaves moved with the breeze. Everything seemed normal, peaceful, even. But Maya knew better than to trust peace. Peace could hide danger, and she'd seen it happen too many times before. She took a sip of her tea, letting the warm liquid slide down her throat. It was a habit she'd picked up years ago, something to keep her hands busy while her mind stayed sharp. The tea wasn't just for comfort, it was a prop, a way to look ordinary. And Maya needed to look ordinary. No one in this neighborhood knew who she really was, not the old man who waved at her every morning while walking his dog. Not the young couple across the street who sometimes asked her for gardening tips. Not even the nosy woman next door who always peeked out her window when Maya came home late. To them she was just Maya, the quiet woman who kept to herself, but that was only half the story. The other half was buried deep, locked away behind a calm face and a steady hand. As she set the mug back down, her ears caught something new. A faint crunch, then another. It was the sound of boots on gravel, slow and deliberate, coming from the direction of the street. She didn't look up right away. Instead, she turned another page in her book, pretending to be lost in the words. Her heart didn't race. Her breathing stayed even. She'd been in situations like this before, too many to count, and panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. The crunching grew louder, closer. She counted the steps in her head. 1 person, no, 2, wait, 3. 3 sets of boots, moving in sync like they'd practiced it. That wasn't random. That was a team. Maya's eyes flicked up from the book, just for a second, long enough to catch a glimpse without giving herself away. 3 men were walking up the path to her house. They wore dark jackets with patches on the sleeves, patches that looked like they belonged to the neighborhood's homeowners association, the HOA. Each carried a clipboard, and the leader, a big guy with a square jaw, had a badge pinned to his chest that glinted in the fading light. They looked official. Too official. Maya's gut twisted, not with fear, but with suspicion. She'd lived here for 2 years and knew the real HOA people by name: Mr. Carter, a fussy old man who cared too much about lawn height, and Mrs. Lopez, who always brought cookies to meetings. These guys? She'd never seen them before. The leader stopped at the edge of her porch steps, his boots thudding against the ground. The other 2 flanked him, 1 on each side, like guards. The second guy was skinny, with twitchy hands that kept adjusting his clipboard. The third was shorter, stocky, with a face that looked like it hadn't smiled in years. They stood there for a moment, staring up at her. Maya didn't move. She kept her book open, her finger resting on the page, and let the silence stretch. She wanted them to speak first. People always revealed more when they had to break the quiet. "Evening, ma'am," the leader finally said. His voice was deep, rough, like he smoked too many cigarettes. He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're with the HOA. Got a complaint about this property." He tapped his clipboard with a thick finger, as if that made it real. Maya tilted her head slightly, studying him. His jacket was too tight across the shoulders, like it didn't fit right. The badge was shiny, but the edges were uneven, cheap, not official. And the way he stood, legs apart, chest puffed out, wasn't how HOA folks acted. They were usually annoyed, not aggressive. These guys were something else. "What kind of complaint?" Maya asked, keeping her tone light, curious. She closed her book slowly, setting it on the table next to her mug. Her hands stayed loose, resting on her lap, but every muscle in her body was ready. She didn't know who they were yet, scammers, thieves, or something worse, but she'd find out soon enough. The leader's fake smile faded a little. He wasn't expecting her to question him. Most people didn't. Most people just nodded and obeyed when someone showed up with a badge and a clipboard. "It's about the porch," he said, nodding at the wooden boards under her chair. "Not up to code. We need you to come with us to sort it out." His words didn't match his tone. There was an edge to his voice, a pushiness that didn't fit a simple HOA visit. Maya's mind raced, piecing it together. The HOA didn't drag people off their own property over a porch. They sent letters, fines, maybe a stern phone call. This was a lie, and not a good one. She glanced at the other two. The twitchy one shifted his weight, his eyes darting to the street. The stocky one cracked his knuckles, a small, impatient sound. They weren't here to talk, they were here to take her. Maya leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Interesting," she said, her voice steady. "Let's see some ID first." The leader blinked, caught off guard. His hand paused over his clipboard. The twitchy one looked at him, waiting for a signal. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken tension. Maya's lips curved into a faint smile, but her eyes were sharp, watching every move. She didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but she knew one thing: they'd picked the wrong woman to mess with. And soon they'd find out why. The evening air felt heavier now, the soft orange glow of sunset fading into a grayish dusk. Maya sat on her porch, her book closed on the table beside her steaming mug of tea. The three men in fake HOA uniforms stood at the bottom of her steps, their shadows stretching long across the gravel path. The leader, a burly man with a square jaw and a badge that didn't look quite right, stared up at her. His forced smile was gone, replaced by a hard line across his mouth. He didn't like that she'd asked for ID. Most people didn't push back, and Maya could see it in his eyes. He wasn't used to this. "Ma'am," he said again, his voice rougher now, like gravel crunching under tires. "You're in violation of HOA rules. We need you off this porch now." He tapped his clipboard twice, as if that made his words official. The clipboard was blank though. Maya had noticed that when he tilted it. No papers, no notes, just a prop to make him look important. She leaned forward slightly in her rocking chair, resting her elbows on her knees. Her face stayed calm, but her mind was spinning, picking apart every detail. These weren't HOA people. HOA folks didn't show up unannounced at dusk, demanding you leave your own house. This was something else, something dangerous. "Rules," she said, keeping her tone light, almost playful. "I own this house, paid it off last year. What rule am I breaking, exactly?" She tilted her head, watching his reaction. The leader's jaw tightened, a small twitch at the corner of his mouth. He hadn't expected her to challenge him again. Most people would have stammered, apologized, or at least looked nervous by now. But Maya wasn't most people. She'd spent years in the CIA, facing down worse than this: men with guns, men with lies, men who thought they could scare her. These three, they were amateurs, and she could smell it. The second man, the skinny one with twitchy hands, shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His clipboard dangled at his side, forgotten. He glanced at the leader, then at the street, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. He was nervous, too nervous for a simple HOA visit. The third guy, short and stocky with a face like a brick wall, stayed silent, but his hands flexed at his sides, knuckles popping softly. They weren't here to talk, Maya realized. They were here to do something, and they didn't want witnesses. The neighbors' houses were quiet, curtains drawn, lights flickering on, as families settled in for the night. No one was watching, at least not yet. The leader took a step up onto the porch, his boot thudding against the wooden step. The sound echoed in the stillness, loud and deliberate. "No more questions," he growled, dropping the fake politeness. "You're coming with us, let's go." He reached out, his thick hand aiming for her arm. Maya didn't flinch. She'd seen this move before. Intimidation, a grab to show who's in charge, but she wasn't about to let him touch her. Not yet. She leaned back in her chair, just out of reach, and raised an eyebrow. "With you?" she said, her voice steady. "Where exactly?" "The HOA office closes at 5, it's past 7 now." She nodded toward the darkening sky, letting the logic hang in the air. The leader froze, his hand hovering mid-reach. She'd caught him again. His story didn't add up, and he knew it. For a second, his eyes flickered with something, anger maybe or doubt. He wasn't as smart as he thought he was, and Maya could use that. She kept her hands loose in her lap, her body relaxed, but every muscle was coiled, ready to move if she had to. The twitchy one couldn't take it anymore. "Enough of this," he snapped, his voice high and shaky. He lunged up the steps faster than the leader, and grabbed Maya's arm. His fingers dug into her sweater, pulling hard. "Move it, lady," he hissed, yanking her forward. The rocking chair creaked as she was forced out of it, her tea mug wobbling on the table but not falling. Maya let him pull her, only for a second. She needed to see how far they'd go, how desperate they were. The stocky one stepped up too, grabbing her other arm, his grip like iron. Together they dragged her down the steps, her sneakers scraping against the wood. The leader smirked, following behind them. "Told you to cooperate," he said, his tone smug, now that they had her. They pulled her across the gravel path, toward a black van parked across the street. Its windows were tinted, too dark to see inside, and the engine was already running, a low rumble cutting through the quiet. Maya's heart didn't race. She didn't scream or struggle. She let them drag her, her head down, her glasses slipping slightly on her nose. To anyone watching, she might have looked scared, helpless, but she wasn't. She was counting steps, measuring distance, waiting for the right moment. The neighbor's curtains twitched. Someone was watching now, a shadow behind a window, a face pressed to the glass, but no one came out. No one called for help. This wasn't that kind of neighborhood. People minded their own business, especially when trouble showed up in uniforms. The men didn't notice the onlookers. They were too focused on getting Maya to the van. The twitchy one's grip slipped a little, his sweaty palm sliding on her sleeve. "Hurry up," he muttered to the stocky one, who grunted and tightened his hold. They were almost at the van now, the back doors swinging open like a dark mouth, ready to swallow her. Maya's mind was calm, sharp, cutting through the chaos. She didn't know who these men were, hired muscle, maybe, or part of something bigger. But she knew one thing, they'd underestimated her. Badly. Her right hand brushed against her watch as they pulled her along, her fingers finding the tiny button hidden on the side. She pressed it, quick and subtle, a move they didn't catch. A faint beep sounded, so soft it blended with the van's engine. The signal was sent. Her team, her ghosts, would be here soon. These fools had no idea what they'd started. The leader opened his mouth to say something, probably another threat, but Maya cut him off with a small cold laugh. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. The men paused, just for a second, thrown off by her tone. The twitchy one's eyes widened, and the stocky one's grip faltered. They didn't know it yet, but the tables were already turning. And Maya, she was just getting started. The gravel crunched under Maya's sneakers as the two men dragged her across the path, toward the black van. The twitchy one, with his sweaty hands slipping on her sleeve, yanked her arm harder, his breathing fast and uneven. The stocky one gripped her other side, his thick fingers digging into her like he was afraid she'd slip away. The leader walked behind them, his heavy boots thudding with every step, a smug grin tugging at his lips. The van loomed closer now, its back doors wide open, the dark interior swallowing the last bits of daylight. The engine growled low, a steady hum that vibrated through the quiet street. To anyone watching from the houses nearby, it might have looked like a simple arrest, 3 HOA officials taking a troublemaker away. But Maya knew better. This wasn't about rules or porches, this was a grab, and she was the target. The air was cool now, the evening settling into night. A faint breeze rustled the leaves on the trees, lining the street, carrying the smell of cut grass and gasoline from the van. Maya's glasses slid down her nose a little as the men pulled her along, but she didn't bother fixing them. Her head was down, her body limp, not because she was giving up, but because she wanted them to think she was. She let her feet drag, scuffing the gravel, slowing them down just enough. Every second counted. She wasn't fighting yet, not with her fists anyway. Her fight was in her head, where she'd always been strongest. The twitchy one muttered under his breath. Come on, his voice tight with nerves. He kept glancing at the van, then at the leader, like he was waiting for something to go wrong. The stocky one didn't say a word, just grunted, as he hauled her forward, his face set in a hard scowl. The leader stayed a step behind, his clipboard tucked under his arm now. Useless. Should have listened, lady, he said, his tone thick with satisfaction. Made this harder than it needed to be. He thought they had her, he thought this was over. Maya's lips twitched, the tiniest hint of a smile. He had no idea. She stumbled then on purpose, her right foot caught on a loose stone, and she let her body dip forward, pulling the men off balance for a split second. The twitchy one cursed, tightening his grip, while the stocky one yanked her upright with a rough jerk. In that moment, her right hand brushed against her watch. It wasn't just a watch, not the kind you'd buy at a store. It was sleek, black, with a small button hidden on the side, flush against the metal so no one would notice unless they knew to look. Maya knew, she'd used it before, in darker places than this quiet suburb. Her fingers found the button, quick and smooth, and she pressed it. A faint beep sounded, barely a whisper, lost in the crunch of gravel and the van's engine. The men didn't hear it, they were too busy dragging her, too sure of themselves. That beep was everything. It was a signal, a call to her team, her ghosts, as she called them. They were CIA operatives, trained to move like shadows, to strike without warning. They were never far, not when she was on a job. And even though she'd been living here quietly for 2 years, blending into this sleepy neighborhood, she was always on a job. The house, the tea, the book on her porch, it was all a cover, a mask she wore to hide who she really was. These men, whoever they were, had no clue they'd walked into a trap. The signal was out now, bouncing through encrypted channels to her team. Help was coming. She just had to keep these fools busy until it arrived. The van was close now, maybe 10 steps away. The leader moved ahead, pulling the back door wider, revealing a dark, empty space inside. No seats, no windows, just a metal box on wheels. Maya's eyes flicked over it, taking in every detail. No markings, no plates she could see from this angle. It wasn't a random vehicle, it was built for this, grabbing people, making them disappear. Her mind raced, piecing it together. Were they hired muscle, thieves looking for a quick score, or something worse, someone who knew her real identity and wanted her gone? She didn't have the answers yet, but she'd get them. She always did. The twitchy one shoved her forward, his hands shaking now. Get in, he snapped, his voice cracking. He was losing it, the pressure getting to him. The stocky one pushed too, his strength making up for his silence. Maya let them move her, her body bending under their force, but her mind stayed sharp. She counted the seconds since the beep. 10, 15, 20. Her team was fast, faster than most, but they needed time to close the distance. She had to stall, to keep this game going a little longer. She planted her feet suddenly, digging her heels into the gravel, forcing the men to stop. What's your problem? The leader barked, stepping closer. His breath smelled like stale coffee and cigarettes, his face inches from hers. He towered over her, trying to intimidate, but Maya didn't blink. She looked up at him through her glasses, her eyes steady, unreadable. You're not HOA, she said, her voice low and calm. So who are you? It wasn't a question she expected them to answer. It was a jab, a way to throw them off, to buy a few more seconds, and it worked. The leader's face twisted, anger flashing in his eyes. He wasn't used to being called out. Shut her up, he growled, nodding at the twitchy one. The skinny man hesitated, his hand hovering near her face, like he wasn't sure what to do. The stocky one tightened his grip, pulling her toward the van again. Maya didn't resist this time. She let them think they'd won, let them drag her the last few steps. Her watch was silent now, the signal sent, 30 seconds, 40. She could almost feel her team closing in, their presence like a shadow creeping closer. The men didn't sense it. They were too focused on her, too blind to the danger they'd invited. The leader grabbed her shoulder, shoving her toward the van's open doors. "In you go," he said, his voice dripping with triumph. Maya stumbled forward, her sneakers hitting the edge of the van's floor. She caught herself, one hand on the cold metal frame, and turned her head just enough to see his smirk. "Big mistake," she whispered, so soft he barely heard it. His smirk faltered, confusion flickering across his face. He didn't know it yet, but the game was about to change. The ghosts were coming, and these men were out of time. The black van sat like a hulking shadow on the quiet street, its back doors gaping open, ready to swallow Maya whole. The gravel crunched under her sneakers, as the twitchy man and the stocky one dragged her the last few steps, their grips tight and desperate. The leader stood by the van, one hand on the door, his smug grin back in place now that they were so close to finishing this. The neighborhood was silent, the houses around them dark, except for the faint glow of living room lights behind drawn curtains. A dog barked somewhere far off, but no one came out to see what was happening. The men thought they had this under control, they thought they'd won, but Maya knew better. The signal from her watch had gone out, almost a minute ago now, and her team, her ghosts were closing in. She just had to wait for the first crack. The twitchy one shoved her toward the van's open doors, his hands trembling so much she could feel it through her sweater. "Get in already," he hissed, his voice high and panicked. Sweat beaded on his forehead, glinting in the dim street light. He kept looking around, his eyes darting to the shadows between the houses, like he sensed something was off, but couldn't place it. The stocky one didn't say a word, just pushed her forward with his brute strength, his face locked in a scowl. Maya let them move her, her body bending under their force, but her mind was calm, counting every second. 55, 60, any moment now, the plan would shift. She could feel it in the air, a tension building like a storm about to break. The leader leaned against the van, crossing his arms. "Told you it'd be easy," he said to the others, his voice loud, cocky. "She's all talk, no fight." He looked at Maya, expecting fear, maybe tears. But she didn't give him that. She stood there half in the van's shadow, her glasses catching the light as she stared back at him. Her face was blank, unreadable, and it threw him off. His grin faltered for a second, just long enough for her to notice. He didn't like that she wasn't scared. He didn't like that she wasn't begging. Maya tilted her head slightly, letting the silence stretch, letting him stew in it. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a reaction, not yet. Then it happened, a flicker. A shadow moved across the street, quick and silent, darting between two parked cars. It was so fast most people wouldn't have seen it, but Maya did. She'd been trained to spot those kinds of things. Years in the CIA had sharpened her eyes, her instincts. The twitchy one saw it too. He froze, his hand still on her arm, his head snapping toward the street. "Did you see that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. His eyes were wide, searching the darkness. The leader rolled his eyes, stepping away from the van. "See what? You're jumping at nothing. Focus," he snapped, waving a hand like it was no big deal. But the twitchy one didn't relax. He let go of Maya for a second, wiping his sweaty palm on his fake HOA jacket, his breathing fast and shallow. Maya stayed still, her hands loose at her sides. She didn't need to look. She knew what was out there, or who. Her ghosts were here, moving into position, tightening the net around these fools. The flicker was just the beginning, a sign they were close. She shifted her weight, pretending to stumble again, and the stocky one grunted, pulling her back upright. "Stop messing around," he muttered, his first words all night. His voice was deep, rough, like he didn't use it much. Maya didn't respond. She kept her head down, her glasses slipping a little, playing the part of the helpless woman they thought she was. But inside, she was smiling. The crack was coming, and they wouldn't see it until it was too late. Then a sound, a low hum, faint at first, like a distant insect buzzing. It grew louder, closer, until it was unmistakable. A drone, small, black, barely visible against the night sky. It hovered above the street, its tiny red light blinking once, twice. Maya saw it out of the corner of her eye, but the men didn't. They were too busy with her, too caught up in their own plan.
The twitchy one was still staring at the shadows, the stocky one was focused on holding her, and the leader was barking orders. "Get her in the van, now," he shouted, his patience gone. He stepped forward, reaching for her himself, his big hand aiming for her shoulder. That's when the first crack hit. A loud pop, sharp, sudden like a gunshot, ripped through the air. The van's front tire exploded, rubber shredding as the rim slammed into the pavement. The whole vehicle lurched to one side, tilting with a groan of metal. The leader spun around, his face twisting in shock. "What the hell?" he yelled, his voice cracking. The twitchy one jumped back, letting go of Maya completely, his hands flying to his head. "What was that? What was that?" he stammered, stumbling over the gravel. The stocky one held on, but his grip loosened, his eyes darting to the van. Panic spread between them like wildfire, their confidence shattering in an instant. Maya straightened up, brushing off her sweater like nothing had happened. She adjusted her glasses, her movements slow, deliberate. "Told you," she said, her voice soft but cutting through the chaos. "Big mistake." The leader whirled on her, his face red with fury. "You did this," he roared, stepping closer, his fists clenched. But before he could reach her, another sound cut through the night, a faint rustle, like leaves moving, but too quick, too purposeful. The shadows were shifting again, closing in. The drone hummed overhead, circling now, its red light steady. The men didn't know it yet, but they were surrounded. Maya took a step back, putting space between her and the stocky one's grip. He lunged to grab her again, but she sidestepped, smooth and fast, letting him stumble forward. The leader pulled something from his jacket, a gun, small and black, its barrel glinting in the streetlight. He aimed it at her, his hand steady, despite the chaos. "Enough games," he snarled. "Get in the van or I shoot." Maya looked at the gun, then at him, her eyes cold, unflinching. "Go ahead," she said, her voice daring him. "See what happens." He hesitated, his finger on the trigger, sweat beading on his brow. The twitchy one was backing away now, toward the van, muttering to himself. The stocky one stood frozen, unsure. The hum of the drone grew louder, and the shadows tightened. The first crack had split their plan wide open, and Maya knew the rest was about to collapse. Her ghosts were here. The tables were turning, and these men were out of moves.
The street was a mess of shadows and tension, the black van slumping on its blown tire like a wounded animal. The leader stood in front of Maya, his gun pointed at her chest, his finger twitching on the trigger. Sweat dripped down his face, his eyes wild with anger and confusion. The twitchy one hovered near the van, his hands shaking as he muttered to himself, while the stocky one stayed close to Maya, his thick hand still gripping her arm. The drone hummed overhead, its red light cutting through the dark, and the air felt electric, like a storm about to break. The neighbors' curtains twitched. Someone was watching, but no one dared step outside. They didn't know what was happening, but Maya did. Her ghosts were here, and the game was over for these fake HOA thugs. The leader's voice was a growl, low and furious. "Last chance, lady. Get in the van, or I shoot." His gun didn't waver, but his confidence did. He didn't understand why she wasn't scared, why she stood there with her glasses glinting in the streetlight, her face calm as stone. Maya looked at him, her eyes steady, almost bored. "You won't," she said, her voice soft but sharp, cutting through the night. "You can't." It wasn't a guess, it was a fact. She'd seen men like him before, all bluster and no backbone. He was mad, sure, but he wasn't ready to pull that trigger. Not yet. Before he could prove her wrong, it happened. A shadow moved, fast, silent, like a ripple in the dark. It came from behind the van, where the streetlight didn't reach. The twitchy one didn't even have time to scream. A figure in black tactical gear, face masked, lunged out of the shadows and tackled him to the ground. One arm locked around his neck, the other pinning his hands, all in a single fluid motion. He hit the gravel hard, a choked gasp escaping his throat before he went limp. Not dead, just out cold. The move was so quick, so quiet, the leader didn't notice at first. He was too focused on Maya, too caught up in his own threats, but the stocky one saw it. His head snapped toward the van, his grip on Maya loosening as his eyes widened. "What the?" he started, his deep voice breaking the silence. That's when the second ghost struck. Another figure, just as fast, emerged from the side of a nearby house. This one held a small device, a stun gun, its tip glowing blue. A dart shot out, silent and precise, hitting the stocky man square in the neck. He jerked, his body stiffening like he'd been shocked by lightning, then crumpled to the ground, his heavy frame kicking up dust as he fell. 2 down, 1 to go. The leader spun around, finally realizing something was wrong, his gun swinging wildly. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice cracking with panic. He stepped back, tripping over the stocky one's legs, his eyes darting between the shadows. The drone's hum grew louder, circling lower now, its light flashing like a warning. Maya didn't move, she stood there, hands loose at her sides, watching him unravel. The leader's gun swung back to her, his hand shaking now. "You did this," he yelled, spit flying from his mouth. "What are you?" He was losing it, the control slipping through his fingers like sand. Maya tilted her head, her voice ice cold. "Someone you shouldn't have crossed." That's when she moved. Fast, faster than he expected. She twisted to the side, out of his aim, and drove her elbow into his throat. The hit was sharp, precise, catching him off guard. He gagged, his free hand flying to his neck, the gun dipping for just a second. That was all she needed. Her other hand shot up, grabbing his wrist and twisting hard. The gun clattered to the gravel, and she kicked it away, sending it skittering under the van. Before he could recover, she slammed her knee into his stomach, doubling him over. He dropped to his knees, coughing, gasping for air. The third ghost appeared then, stepping out from behind a tree across the street. Another figure in black, moving like a phantom, silent and deadly. The leader didn't see them coming. A gloved hand grabbed his shoulder, yanking him back, while a zip tie snapped around his wrists in seconds. He thrashed, swearing and spitting, but it was no use. The ghost shoved him face down into the gravel, a knee pressing into his back. "Stay down," a muffled voice said through the mask, low, calm, final. The fight was over before it even started. Maya stepped back, brushing her hands on her jeans like she'd just finished a chore. She adjusted her glasses, pushing them back up her nose, and looked around. The street was a scene of chaos now, 3 men down, sprawled out like broken toys. The twitchy one lay unconscious near the van, the stocky one twitched faintly, as the stun dart wore off, and the leader groaned under the ghost's knee. The drone hovered above, its light steady, watching everything. Neighbors peeked through their windows, shadows behind curtains, their gasps faint but audible. They'd seen it all, but they wouldn't understand. Not really. The ghosts worked fast. The first one dragged the twitchy man toward the van, securing his hands with zip ties. The second checked the stocky one, making sure he stayed down, then pulled a small radio from their belt. "Target secure," they said, voice clipped and professional. The third kept the leader pinned, ignoring his muffled curses. Maya walked over to the porch, picking up her tea mug from the table. It was cold now, but she didn't care. She took a sip anyway, leaning against the railing, watching her team clean up the mess. The leader twisted his head, glaring up at her from the ground. "Who are you?" he rasped, his voice weak, broken. Maya looked down at him, her smile small and deadly. "Someone who doesn't like being dragged off her porch," she said. The ghost holding him tightened the zip ties, cutting off his next words. Sirens wailed in the distance, not police, but something else. Something quieter, more discreet. CIA cleanup was on the way. The neighbors would talk, sure, but they'd never know the truth. And that was just how Maya wanted it. The ghosts moved like a well-oiled machine, no wasted steps, no hesitation. They were her team, her shadows, her backup. She'd called them with that tiny beep, and they'd answered without question. The tables had turned, just like she'd planned. The men who thought they could take her were nothing now, just bodies in the dirt, waiting for the next move. Maya set her mug down, crossing her arms. The night wasn't over yet, but this part was hers.